As the Aurora Theater trial continues, contents of the defendant's much talked about notebook were released this week. Its findings reveal details ranging from estimated police response time to comparisons of security measures at other facilities. Craig, we haven't usually gone through, bit by bit. This is going to be a long trial, so we haven't done a lot with James Holmes' trial, but this notebook was a major deal. This was what everyone talked about before the trial started, and now it's become part of the trial. You're a lawyer, you're an expert. What did you make of the proceedings this week?
This was the biggest week of the trial. Openings were interesting, but we had three major developments, starting with the notebook. The notebook revealed the writings of the perpetrator, and it also had burnt $20 bills. So there was a lot of stuff in there indicating he was crazy. But there are also other things where he's pondering, should I attack an airport? Should I become a serial murderer? And instead he settles on the movie theater because they won't expect it, not much security. He even calculates the police are 3 miles away. He's mulling it over, demonstrating an ability to distinguish right from wrong. As for the crazy stuff, understand that the perpetrator, I don't like to use his name, he wanted to commit the crime, survive the crime, anticipated being arrested, prosecuted, and then going to jail. In fact, this came out in the evidence, we heard about it before, that on internet dating sites he put up his picture and said, "Will you visit me in prison?" Again, dynamite evidence for the prosecution. And they called the first expert, Dr. Reed out of Texas. Understand he was the second appointed psychiatrist by the state. He's an interesting guy in that he's a mental health professional who favors capital punishment and has even written on the propriety of mental health professionals participating with prosecutors such as he is doing. So I'm sure the defense will attack him on that, saying, "You're a capital penalty zealot from Texas. We expect this from you." But this jury is watching 22 hours of interviews with the defendant, and there's a lot to absorb for them this week.
Natasha, are we seeing the reason why there was so much battling over this notebook now this week that we're seeing just some of the material coming out of it?
Absolutely. Just judging from the number of conversations I've had about the notebook this week, people are very interested in whatever information it might reveal. Universally, though, I don't think it's provided closure. I think people were hoping that that would give some sort of explanation for why this horrific crime took place. And it doesn't do that. If anything, it presents more questions. Skipping away from the trial, but in a related way for a moment, as I've been involved in these conversations, as someone who's written about mental health issues in the past, I'm very concerned about how we discuss this topic because they are related but also completely different. We know now that 1 in 4 people will suffer from a mental illness in their life. That can range from, yes, schizophrenia, but they can also be just mild depression. So when we're having casual conversations about this topic and making broad statements about what the legal definition of insanity is and whether we're informed or not, or whether we know what we're talking about, there may be somebody who's sitting next to you who suffers from a mental illness who might be very offended but has not chosen to share that diagnosis with you. So I just want to make sure that people are aware of this as we're having these conversations outside of the courtroom as well.
Patty, what did you make of what we saw so far from the case?
Well, there were a lot of bombshells here. And one of the things is, personally, as you think about this, you would hope that no person in their right mind could possibly do something this horrific, because you always are looking for explanations whenever you write about a horrible crime situation. But the fact, Natasha's right, that people don't understand the legal difference between mental illness and being judged not guilty by reason of insanity. And there is evidence in that notebook that, he was what we would say crazy. Certainly, I don't think a good dating theory is to say, "Come visit me in prison." But there were a lot of other things that indicated he was just not really on the planet at the time. On the other hand, you could see that he was a really superior intellect and making a lot of plans, capable of making some plans. So we still have so much of this trial to go, and so much heartache for the jurors, for the victims, for everyone who is watching.
Todd, do you think we're seeing one of the biggest weeks of the trial with the revealing of all these different details?
Yeah, and quite frankly, I think the notebook is the least of this evidence. Once we got into the interview portions of the interview with the mental health professionals, that's where I really started to see more about the perpetrator's mindset. I think Patty brings up great points about, the definition of criminal insanity, but I'm looking at this trial from someone that I'm not a psychiatrist. I've not been given a tutorial on the definition of criminal insanity, but I think the prosecution, I don't see a single mistake they've made so far. I see them just connecting the dots all over the place. I think the psychiatrist made the distinction that the perpetrator was mentally ill but criminally sane, and I think that's a distinction that is easy for a jury to understand, that you can be both at the same time. Also in the interview, the perpetrator seemed to express empathy for parents of like his own parents, or people that might be parents of someone that would commit an atrocity like that. And expressions of empathy like that, in my mind, are incredibly damning to any notion of being criminally insane.